Hey, so this is William from the future. So this is quite a different episode. It's the first of two parts discussing Technical Trouble 2. In this part, we talk to Dave, Lennie and Andy Boyer, the creators of the Biff and Mario series. We have a really great conversation with them and also talk about the process of working together with Penta on Technical Trouble 2. And then in the second part, which we'll be releasing next week, we will be talking to Loic, the legendary composer from the Brickfilms.com era, and also the composer of Technical Trouble 2. We had also have a really interesting conversation with him. But without further ado, here is the first part of the podcast. Hello everybody, welcome to a very special episode of the World of Brickfilms podcast. I am your host, William of AW Studios. Joining with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Sean Woods of Sillypenta.
I'm finally a featured guest again.
Yeah, so today we've got some very special guests. We've got Dave, Lennie and Andy Boyer, the creators of the Biff and Mario series.
Hello.
Hello.
So I feel like this episode has been like a long time coming because I know Penta's been like a massive fan for years, and actually so have I. When I was first getting into brick filming, I watched a lot of the films on the Brickfilms wiki. And I came across, I think it was TE was the first one in the series that I saw. And I remember at first I was kind of like, I was a bit sort of surprised because it wasn't like the usual kind of brick film, but I was really hooked by like, I think the voice acting and like the writing really stood out to me. And I just think there just seems to be a lot going on in the film that was just really funny. And since then I've just been a massive fan.
The tech side is definitely an acquired taste, or something you have to look the other way on. But I agree. Yeah, there's I think it's always been. I don't know if it's Andy. You can speak to whether it's something that guided you, but it was sort of like taking a children's toy and making it a movie that was more adult themed. You know, and seeing that sort of difference is what makes them unique or different?
Yeah, I suppose that's part of it. I think I just had stories in my head that I wanted to tell, for good or for bad, and this was a way to get them out there.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it just sort of holds up in general as far as being funny. Like I kind of feel like the general idea of just taking something for children and making it a bit more adult is kind of lazy. But these films, they aren't just doing that. Like they're funny just because they're funny. You know what I mean? So. Yeah, like you could do it with other like action figures or whatever.
Yeah, really, it's Dave just happened to have some Legos in his house.
Yeah.
It could have been Playmobil, and then we'd have Playmobil movies.
Yeah, but I feel like it's written in a clever enough way that it's not just getting by on, a kind of crude concept.
Yeah, I'm impressed that people could watch those early movies and be influenced by them anymore. I haven't watched those early ones in a long time.
Yeah, me neither.
I certainly have watched them. We actually did a bit of an impromptu screening, a couple of us in the chat, before we watched Technical Trouble 2 at the premiere. We watched all of the old ones in a row.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's painful.
People enjoyed them. And they particularly enjoyed Heart of Darkness.
That's very impressive for people to enjoy that one.
That one at least had tighter editing on it.
Yeah, it does.
Because we did that when I was working at the TV station, so we had some different resources available to us. But yeah, now I teach production now, and so like watching some of that stuff, it's like breaking every rule that I set down for my students, and they're a little painful.
But when I showed them to people that time, I said a few words before each one, and I was explaining that like. At the time, let's say OL, when OL was made, obviously it's pretty painful to watch now, even though there's plenty of bits in it that I like, but like, I was explaining that at that time, the Brickfilms people were making basically almost never had speech, and they almost never had any audio editing at all. So it's impressive that it has edited lines in the film, and music and sound effects. Even if it's very slow and all. It's still very impressive for the time it was made. And actually, people were wondering, how is it that you had sound effects to put in the films at that time?
I remember for OL, we recorded a few of them. I remember going out to my garage and like kicking the garage door or something to make the sound of the explosion, because my parents had this super old wooden garage door that kind of rattled a whole bunch. And so I know we did that. We pulled some from a collection I had purveyed on open reel tape from someplace. But yeah, I don't know. Andy, do you remember anything else?
I don't remember that, but I still find it amazing how much effort we put into something that had an audience of 5 people as far as we knew. Like, we weren't doing this for anyone to see except us and 3 other people. So, yeah, I don't know why we did it.
That's a better question.
That is, well, sometimes I feel like when I was making Taco Trouble 2, sometimes I felt like I'd seen the shots so often, and I started to feel like, well, I've gotten the satisfaction out of these shots. Do I even need to bother releasing this? Like that thought would just cross my mind very briefly. So I feel like there's some just personal satisfaction in setting out to make something and then actually achieving it.
I think you have to have that. If you're just doing it for other people, it's not the same. You got to be doing it for yourself, which we did for 10 years or more.
Yeah, at least. I mean, even by the time we were doing Heart of Darkness, it was there was no video on the web really then, was there?
No, I think Taco Trouble was probably the first one that we knew other people would see beyond our very small circle.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you first put them online, even then I'm guessing you didn't think that people were going to find them online.
No.
But was Taco Trouble made, or actually, when was Taco Trouble written originally?
Man, this is getting into the past. I would assume it was written right before we actually produced it. So when did it come out? 2003, 4, 3? So I would guess 2001, 2002, somewhere around there. I don't think I had it sitting around for a while.
For some reason, I felt like I had a memory of like that it might have been written in 1995, but I could be wrong.
You have better memory than I do, if that's
well,
true.
I know you said Taco Trouble 2. I mean, the one that it just came out. That one you wrote on the heels of the other one. So maybe, I don't know if you're thinking of that.
Yeah, that
right.
was written,
I mean, like,
that
right
was
right afterwards, because it was all fresh in your head.
But I was wondering, with the big massacre scene in Taco Trouble, was that kind of made specifically knowing that there was now a community of brickfilmers who would watch a film and it would be funny if, you just destroyed all the Lego with blood flying everywhere? That would shock the audience.
I would say yes. I think that, because that scene, we made that before we made the rest of the movie. That was the very first thing we made. And that was made knowing that people are going to see this, and how are they going to react, besides it being interesting to put the music and violence together. But yeah, I knew there'd be an audience to watch it.
Yeah, and it still works to this day. Maybe even more so because of how valuable those figures are that are being destroyed.
That's what I was going to say, is we're destroying like original 70s spacemen and castle people.
But we never took that into account. I don't remember thinking these are valuable. It's just, this is what I had in my basement.
Yeah, what you have lying around. You can totally tell.
It was definitely a lot of yours that we destroyed. You had more than me. I mean, all those castle people were the henchmen for Dr. X. So that's the people who all bought it.
I still got dozens of those in my basement too.
With holes drilled in them?
Some, but I have dozens without holes. I must have a gold mine down there.
Wow.
I mean, well, just don't put any more holes in them. But it was really funny when we had the screening of Taco Trouble before the new one, and the reaction of that scene. It was like half like being really impressed by it, and then like other half it was kind of like the shock. But one of the things I really like about that scene, I remember a few people commenting on it, is how much the actions are kind of like match the music, like the beats of the music. Like you got the sort of the drum, and it's like the gunshot to the head and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely want it to be quote unquote artistic. I remember that the violence should be artistic and look interesting. I think in the past I've referenced like The Wild Bunch, it's an old movie from the late 60s that has this really artistic violence, and that was definitely influential in that. Plus, just the shock of throwing this in the middle of a comedy movie, I thought was good.
And you picked that music.
Yeah.
I didn't pick that. That was not on my radar at the time. Now I love that song.
Mm-hmm.
But
Actually,
yeah, and that's a whole other thing too, is the idea of all the popular or definitely copyrighted music that we used in the early stuff, and probably up to that point, you can't get away with that anymore, or at least you're going to get tagged or possibly blocked in regions, or if you put that up on YouTube or any of the public.
I tried to put the old films on YouTube, but most of them got blocked. So I have them on Google Drive hosted and linked on the wiki. But the whole album that the music is from is great. And I really do like how that it kind of turns into more of an experiment in editing at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, it's unlike the kind of stuff you see. But I'm just reminded, when I spoke with Dave before to do the History of Brickfilms video with the interview, one thing I asked during that was about Bork and the reaction to Bork on the forum at the time. And basically I've always been curious about if the news ticker in breaking news is referring to how the community responded to Bork when it's talking about like people being offended by swearing in a restaurant. And Dave basically said you'd have to ask Andy about that. So
I would assume so, because I would assume I wrote those tickers. I mean, again, it's a long time, but knowing me, I would say yes, I was probably poking fun at people, because everything that I think when I try to write something, if people have, buttons that kind of tick them off, I want to push that button. So
that is exactly the phrase I was about to use, is you like to push people's buttons.
And if they tell me what their buttons are, which people back then, I kind of remember people would have debates about is it okay to have profanity? Is it okay to have violence? Is it okay to do this? And the fact that you even asked that question means you've got a button that needs to be pushed. So that's what I like to do.
I mean, I feel like that conversation only ended like about 5 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. You'd still see that pop up even, only a couple of years ago, but it's mostly stopped by now.
I find that amazing. I just can't believe, I'm amazed when people will like even bring that up, like, should you do this or is this appropriate? It's like you can't ask that question. Of course
what is out of bounds?
Yeah, I think by now people just accept that other people are going to do what they want, and there's no point really complaining about it. But I feel like I have a similar sensibility where as soon as if I can figure out what'll annoy somebody, my first instinct is to poke at it.
So like, Andy and I are certainly, I am very removed from the Brickfilm community, and I don't think we were ever really like, even when we started doing stuff and posting it online, it was like we just put stuff on our website, and I don't know that we ever really plugged into what everyone talked about. Andy, you did a little bit maybe. But like, are there a lot of like, for lack of a better term, like policemen? Like, are there a lot of people who are just like, oh, that's terrible that you would do that?
There used to be.
Okay, so now people are generally more accepting.
Yeah, I'd say so.
See, if I was still involved writing, making stuff, then I'd have to find a new way what would poke people, what would get them to go, wait a second, you've gone too far this time. I'm sure I could come up with something.
Well, we've already hit a lot of the big the big topics: organized religion and let's see, incest. That one goes way back to the 80s, right? That was one of our first ones.
I'm actually surprised that I thought that Taco Trouble 2 might get a couple of annoyed comments for one thing or another. but I think that there's a big difference to be drawn in just being offensive for the sake of being offensive, or using it cleverly.
I agree.
It really depends on sort of the underlying idea of the joke. the root
Yeah.
of it. And I feel like in Taco Trouble 2, a lot of the times the root of the joke is, if you actually think about it. Let's say if somebody comes along and says, "Oh, how can you can't put Jesus in here," and ask him these questions and whatnot. But the root of the joke is bringing the other type of law into a courtroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not just making fun of Jesus or religion just for the sake of it. There's more going on.
Yeah, I think that's always, in Bork, there's a lot of profanity, but it's not just for profanity. You need to have something under, Biff's not taking his medicine, and that's causing him to say these things. And so, yeah, I agree. You got to have something more than just shock value.
Yeah.
It needs to get at something deeper than that.
I feel like Bork is one of the best examples of a film that on paper shouldn't be funny at all, but it's absolutely hilarious.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
That's why I keep doing lines from it.
A large part of it is the voice acting. It sells every single line.
Yeah, every time I would write, the lines for Biff and Mario, I always have those voices in my head. I mean, I have to have that in my head to go, how is this going to sound when they speak like that?
Yeah. I was so happy with the voices in the new film as well. It just slots right in.
Yeah, I was really pleased. I just like top to bottom, like we talked about on email. Like it's just to hear it all put together was, I mean, just to listen to it. Forget about all the amazing visuals as well, or the music. Just to hear all the pacing kind of properly done because all these people were all over the country. Or at least all over the Midwest. As far as, we didn't cut this all in one room. So the only stuff that was done together is the multiple characters that I did. But I don't remember, did we do like all of Jesus's lines and then all of Mario's lines? I think that might have been how we did it. Just so I could kind of stay in character a little bit.
Yeah, I was sent blocks of each character, yeah.
Yeah.
But even the timings of the deliveries of the lines were really funny as well. I almost didn't edit most of the timings because I thought that they were just perfect. Especially when he's talking to Jesus, I took a lot of inspiration from Breaking News, which is really, really well timed, as far as leaving just the right amount of space between each line to make it funny. And I think it's an amusing arc to go from "Oh well" all the way to Breaking News. "Oh well" is horrible timing. And then eventually by Breaking News it's a film that a lot of the comedy is in the specific timing.
Yeah, it just took 15 years to figure that out.
Yeah, right. I feel like on some of that we might have left room for reaction. Am I crazy in that, Andy? Did we...
Which one are you talking about?
I kind of... in the more modern ones that we did, that the pacing allows for... not a laugh track, but a reaction before the next line comes.
I'll say yes, that's true.
I just felt like they were just timed to make it funnier. Like when Jesus is asked a question and then he waits before saying yes.
Yeah, that was very deliberate, yeah.
Yeah. It all comes across as deliberate to me and adding to the comedy. But in some of the older films, the awkwardness almost comes across as funny in its own way, I think. It's like you have to wait to see what the response is going to be. Look, Mario, trees! And then a big gap, and it's like, well, what's he going to say next? Does the sight of trees excite you?
And on some of that, it was such a cart before the horse production because we did the video first, and then we're trying to, I can remember I need to read that slower. It's going by too quickly, and then there's too much of a gap before the next line. So we're drawing things out like that. Like that trees line. I remember doing that. We've got more time for this. I can dwell on it. Yeah. And now you can you read it the way you want to read it, and then you create the pacing that you want to create.
But I suppose I should ask, how did you get into video production in the first place?
So my parents were both high school teachers. My dad taught high school before my mom got into it, but So, and he decided sometime in the 70s to start up a television studio at our high school. So, like, when I was 8 or 9, he was bringing me along on these productions that I was just fascinated by. So, yeah, it was in my blood. And when I, actually went to high school, I participated in it there. And then when I came to college, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And, that it's been a singular path for me since I was pretty young.
Yeah, it's bizarre to see some of that behind the scenes footage, and there's it's like a big wall of video players or like Avid editing, all sorts of machines. I don't even know what most of them are.
That was our dorm room, right?
Yeah, the big wall of crap that we had in there, which I am sitting like a couple 100 yards from right now.
You've gone far in your life.
I have, yeah. I've circled right back.
I'm just remembering another thing that I asked previously, and it was considered to be an Andy question. Oftentimes when I show people the Biff and Mario films, one of the first things they ask is, why does Mario talk like that? And usually I just say something like, because it's funny. But I wonder if there is any idea of a more specific influence behind Mario's voice.
I think that's a Dave thing. Like, when we created Oh Well that weekend, I think I wrote it first, and then doing the voices, Dave just had to come up with 2 separate voices. The voices weren't there yet. And I assume Biff was based on like Bill and Ted. That first movie had just come out.
Yes, absolutely. And the other one was like, well, what's the opposite of that? What is our odd couple here that we're going to create? It has to be, we need the straight man. And
when I was editing together my history video, like, and watching the behind the scenes footage when you're having conversations and stuff, I just had this strange idea. I mean, I could be way off on this, but like, it seemed like Dave speaking was always very expressive, whereas Andy would be more deadpan. Like, I have the clip in the video. It's like Andy says something like, "Can you do a smooth edit?" And I was wondering if Mario's voice... Is there any possibility that Mario's voice was you making fun of Andy?
Probably subconsciously. That's probably true, Dave.
I don't know. I never thought about that. That maybe the two of them represent the 2 of us.
You've always hated me.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not.
I do remember Dr. X, the voice, was very specific what I had in mind, because I brought this over, was from the Monty Python sketch, the Spanish Inquisition, the priest from that sketch, if you're familiar with it, that was very specific who Dr. X was supposed to be modeled on.
I remember getting specific direction on what you wanted that to sound like. Very, very manic.
Yeah.
Actually, I have another question about a random idea I had. Was it a specific influence on Dr. X's pleasure pain device, a 60s film called Barbarella?
I'm familiar with that, but I don't think so. Is that in that movie?
There's something similar.
I think there's also a Woody Allen movie from the 70s called Sleeper that has some type of pleasure device in it. Who knows? There's all kinds of things that get jumbled up in my head, so it's very possible.
Did it have anything to do with the cowboy contraption?
I don't remember that, but who knows?
Oh, you don't remember that?
I remember that. I don't remember what influenced the pleasure pain device.
Okay.
It's a long time ago, and I've got all kinds of movie influences in my head. So
that just makes me think of the movie scene recreations that you did, like the Godfather scene. And I was watching that recently. I thought it was very interesting that it draws attention to the fact that it's funny to recreate the scene in Lego, because it is kind of inherently funny to take a scene from The Godfather and do it in Lego. But nowadays there's plenty of scene recreations and film trailer recreations and whatnot that people make, but they don't consider it to be amusing. They just make it because they just make it. But like in the Godfather recreation, whenever the character blinks, there's this little added like ding, ding
the
noise.
xylophone. Yeah.
And so basically that stuck out to me because of how common it is now to do scene recreations, but the fact that it's Lego it's like it's incidental to the people who are making them. So I don't know, like maybe people ought to think about like drawing attention to it being funny to recreate things in Lego.
And I remember adding that, and it was sort of like it was something like Hanna-Barbera did a lot, I think, with like, I want to say like Yogi Bear and like those sort of 70s cartoons they did. They would like their characters, when not every time they blinked, but when it was like blinking in thought, that you would hear that kind of noise. I have to say too that Andy, you'll get a kick out of this. We literally over the last week and a half or so, we watched all the Godfather movies.
Ah, nice.
And I'd seen bits and pieces, and of course we hit that one scene in the first movie, and I'm like, I knew every little tiny subtle piece of that dialogue, and then it was like, so it was good to see it in context. But in my head, as they're talking, let's just listen to the song. As they're talking, I'm hearing those ding ding, those little blinks. Yeah, and seeing Arwen in the background of one of those. Because I went back and watched that, like her head pops up in one of those. Because those were just experiments, as all those were, to play around with the moving mouths.
And was she just like wandering in the background, and just so happened to be captured in the camera?
Yeah,
I have wondered
and
about
I don't think
that
before. We had no specific backdrop for some of those. Like it was just like shooting off the edge of whatever room we were in. I don't know if we were in the garage then or.
So I'm guessing those were kind of made to just test out the mouth movement with like drawn mouths.
Those were head swaps that we did. And that's back when or at least all the Lego people everybody was wearing a smile. Like now you can there's people with facial hair and different expressions on their face. And my son has some Legos now that there's a different face on the back now. Like so you can get two different expressions. But everybody wore a smile on the stuff that we had. So we erased the mouths and with a Sharpie drew in different mouths, different shapes, and then swapped out the heads and animated between the different frames of that, which really didn't work very well because the people moved around so much. And then we ended up going with, I think maybe the Mad Max one was added electronically afterwards. I don't remember.
And yeah, for you to have digital mouths at that time is pretty ahead of its time.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. And actually, yeah, when I was making Taco Trouble 2, something I found useful was that I wanted for the characters to pretty much always have the original digital mouths so that they'd look like themselves. But when Jingles is throwing crap at Biff, I knew I couldn't have a digital mouth there because it'd be too difficult to try and track it with crap covering it. But because they made a bunch of figures for the Lego movie where the main character's face is kind of based on the old classic smile, but he has a bunch of different expressions in different sets. And, he has the solid black eyes that would match Biff and Mario. So I managed to use one of those faces as his expression for when he's getting crap thrown on him. And then after that, I was kind of looking back through the film and thinking to myself, like, I probably could have gotten away with a printed Lego movie face here. Like when Biff is smiling with the bananas, that was pretty difficult to track because he's got a lot of very fine movement. And I was just like, I should have just shot it with a Lego movie face.
I'm so glad that you did that, by the way. I remember having to talk you into doing moving mouths. And I think you just did a fantastic job.
Oh, yeah. Well, at first I was concerned that I wouldn't know how to do them. Then I got somebody else on board to animate the mouths. But then the pandemic hit and, life changed. And so he had to drop out from doing the mouths, understandably so. But then my brother learned Blender and discovered a system to track them with that. And so he did all of the tracking in 3D space, whereas I lined up all the shapes on a flat video with a green background, and then sent those to him, and he tracked that into 3D.
Oh, I see. So you picked the shapes based on the audio, and then gave him that full screen, and he put it in position.
Mm-hmm. And then once I got that back, I tweaked all the levels of the colors and the saturation and whatnot to try and to match each shot.
Yeah, they look real to me. I mean, they look like they're printed on there. So, kudos.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with how they came out. All right, and also in the end, I was happy to have done them myself because I discovered, you could add in tiny little funny details if you're in total control. Like let's say when Jingles calls Biff and Mario filthy perverts, and just for a few frames, Mario smiles. Like, you could just throw in little details like that without having to dictate them all to somebody else. But yeah, it took a little bit longer than expected to make the film. I'm aware.
Worth the wait.
I'm glad to hear that. But just by reading the script, I thought the film would be shorter. I didn't realize it was going to be 11 minutes long. So I went a bit crazy with the set and the manner in which it was shot. Like setting up the lighting for each individual shot took forever. But I was kind of thinking the film would only be about 6 or 7 minutes. So then a bunch of minutes got added on.
How long was the original one? It was almost the same.
14.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I was actually happy though that it turned out to be similar to the original because I kind of thought, if this is the long-awaited sequel to Taco Trouble, it'd be a bit lame if it was only like 4 or 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm surprised that that it was exactly 14 minutes. But... you barked that off right. Oh yeah, how long was the original one? 14 minutes. Of course he knows that. Of course.
Yeah.
I just I think as well, like, I feel like if it was shorter, it wouldn't. It would go by so quickly. I mean, it does go by so quickly anyway. I think.
I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, as well, I feel like because it is just one, like, mostly just one really long scene, but the fact that it goes by really quickly just is a testament to like, well, I mean, it's the quality overall quality, the cinematography and the editing, and also like obviously the acting and the writing as well. I think it's a blend of all you guys together, I think.
There's so much subtle throwbacks to what you built into the sets, like at the end the little tiny police car that they would never fit into is what they drive back, and that was built with that's some of the oldest Legos I had that we built that out of. And that you match that so well, and then you have doors closing. We don't actually see them get out, or maybe they kind of appear suddenly. I don't remember, but I enjoyed that kind of stuff. Or seeing the flower people at the back of the gallery, or all the other characters that were there watching, kind of like the Seinfeld trial. Everybody they had ever wronged was there to watch the process.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I suppose Biff and Mario is not entirely unlike Seinfeld, in that, like, the characters, if you think about it, they're kind of awful. You have to understand that to really get it. And I suppose people watching them now would be oftentimes surprised to learn that it predates South Park and Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of people who saw Taco Trouble 1, when he's at the end, when he's saying, like, what have we learned today, they probably thought that was, like, directly from South Park, but it wasn't.
Yeah, that goes back to the original. Wasn't that in Oh Well? Did they do that?
Yeah, they did.
But yeah, when I had a rough cut of the film, I suddenly realized that it did seem to fly by, and I was pretty happy with that. Even though it's an 11-minute film, it feels like, a lot shorter than that, I think. And certainly when I was making it, I set out specifically to try to improve my, visual handle on things. Previously I was making Brickfilms more to write things and, come up with funny little things. I wasn't really trying to make the cinematography all that good or anything. I mean, I wasn't thinking about it. It kind of just never crossed my mind. But with this one, because I didn't write it or do the voices, we had this idea in mind that we have to sort of step up our game with all of the visuals. And so, we bought a lot of equipment at the start. And also I watched a lot of trial films in preparation. And other films as well. Just to study them. And I'd actually recommend that if anyone's listening, if you want to improve visually, especially, cinematography and pacing and editing and whatnot, watch real films and think about them while you're watching them.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone I've shown it to has felt the same way about it goes by so quickly and the pacing. You're not getting bored or nothing slows down, so it's very good.
And it does feel like a good courtroom drama. Like it's I mean, not a drama, but like it feels like every courtroom scene you've ever seen. Like it's like the camera angles are pretty standard there. The set, of course, looks perfect, but it's got that sort of like old courtroom kind of feel. Like an episode of Perry Mason or something.
Yeah, I wanted it to be... Well, yeah, we had this idea. I think Andy suggested it first, that it should be kind of shot seriously, which would make it seem funnier.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like a Doctor Strangelove thing or something.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of the absurdity of taking this trial seriously, and the judge takes it seriously, and Mr. Jingles takes it seriously, but the whole thing is just completely absurd. I think that works very well.
Yeah, and that really guided a lot of how I made the film, that idea.
I like Jeff's performance too as the judge. Like it's got a little bit of Dr. X in it, like just sort of a little bit manic, like totally unnecessarily, but it's good writing too, his lines, but I thought that those were, no, I'll allow it, like it's just that kind of ridiculous read for a judge. I thought was, and that's not a character that he played in any of our movies. We just asked him to participate. He was one of the, what was he was a Garlean,
Yeah.
What else was he? Flower People.
He had some character in the original Taco Trouble, that guy on the street.
Oh man, I don't remember.
The very
that.
first guy that Mario meets when he's walking down the street in the opening scene.
I really like that you got him back. I like that there's some additional history since he's been in the series for 30 years. And of course, I had a similar idea of getting some of the people who were around in 2001 to do a couple of additional voices.
The end credits, and you see the whole cast. It's really quite crazy, because it's just so many big names, and just so many names just in general.
Yeah, actually, something that I thought was funny. I've always had this idea in mind that it would be funny to have kind of recognizable names, but they don't really do much. All they do is gasp or whatever.
I mean,
completely incidental.
I guess it's kind of a bit like Wes Anderson films, where you get these really big actors just to have very small scenes.
But there are points, I pointed this out in one of those emails, that there are little where everybody's kind of murmuring as the soldier with the spear through his chest is coming in. There are individual lines that you can pick out of there, and they're all relevant. They're not just worthless kind of hubbub noise. It's individual comments that fit.
Yeah, I think that make a huge difference.
I think Penta, isn't Sanjura got a line in that point, isn't he? It's really funny.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, it was very difficult though to edit all of those lines, and I tried to space them around and pan them left and pan them right so that you could hear a couple of individual things. It was all very particular to not just have them all on top of each other, so that kind of delayed the film a bit. There was for a good week or more, I kept telling people on Discord, yeah, it'll be out tomorrow, I'll have it finished tonight, it'll be out tomorrow. It didn't happen. Because I completely underestimated how long it would actually take to get all the sound together.
There's also, I really like just how many different cameos in the jury. There's lots of different different characters from different Brick films.
Mm-hmm. And people might be surprised to hear that actually wasn't my idea. It was Andy's idea for the jury to consist of well-known characters from other Brick films.
That's true, and I didn't recognize any of them. So.
Yeah, I picked them, but it wasn't my idea. Well, I wanted to get a nice, like, they're kind of spread out as far as the time periods they originate from.
Yeah, because you've got some.
You've got the guy from the Gauntlet in there.
Yeah, you got some. You got some, like, Brickfilms.com era ones. You got like more recent ones as well. It's a nice sort of range of different characters. It's quite funny.
And of course, if the voice actors for the characters are still around, I wanted to get them to provide something. And again, with the jury all kind of being on top of each other, like, I didn't want to really draw attention to, who's voicing the jury or the audience. I wasn't trying to like show off or whatever. So people might think it's kind of funny that like the jury have their actual voice actors, but what they're saying isn't actually important, and it's all on top of each other as just a crowd mumble. Again, it kind of plays with the idea that it's funnier to like get all these people to do something pretty unimportant.
Yeah, but it also didn't take them long to do, right? I mean, just
I hope not.
turn on a microphone and give a couple of wild lines, and
yeah. But with the crowd noises, I asked people. I told them they could just do like one or two sounds, like just if you just send me one gasp, I'll throw it in. But pretty much everyone sent like multiple minutes worth of little offhand remarks and other noises. So I've got I must have over an hour's worth of crowd noise to pick from.
God.
And at first I kind of just told people to just, either say, oh my God, or gasp, or I told them they could improvise if they wanted. But very quickly I realized that I needed all the improvisations. I couldn't just have the crowd saying the same phrase over and over and over and over again. So I was hunting through all of the minutes I had to see if I could find some phrases that hadn't been used already. So it was actually very useful that people sent me so much. So yeah, this is my way of saying thank you, people.
Yeah, I mean, there are some genuinely really funny, like, improvised lines in throughout that you kind of. I think
I really liked.
It takes kind of like repeat viewings, and you keep like hearing new stuff, which is really funny.
And I know that you wouldn't actually be able to recognize every individual voice. Like, not everyone gets a moment to shine exactly, but I can guarantee that everyone who sent something is in there somewhere, even if you can't actually hear yourself.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, to go back to, we were talking about the crowd and how you have the flower people and the guardians in there. Every single member of the crowd is from one of the previous films, even if they're just a complete throwaway character in a previous film in the background or something. Every design is from one of the previous ones, and it took a lot of
minus
bricklink orders.
the holes drilled in them.
Oh well, I guess none of the dead people showed up. Some of the ones who got injured are in the front with bandages on.
That's true. Those guys are all gone. They're dead. Somehow that soldier survived with the spear through his chest. Did you drill a hole in that, or is that just glued to the outside?
No, that was sent. You sent that.
Oh, I sent that?
That was
Andy,
an original.
I remember that.
Yeah, Andy gave you the figure and you sent it. I suppose we'll have to talk about the figures, which I still have.
Oh, you've got them hostage now?
Apparently they belong in a museum.
Maybe I'll have to start the Brickfilm Museum.
They normally sit in a model Jeep above my computer, just waiting out for eternity, I guess.
I was kind of thinking, like, the film got a really great response as soon as it came out. I was pretty taken aback by just how many comments came in and how well people liked it. And I put the question mark at the end to sort of mirror the original film. And like the end of the film does pretty much seem to set up that there'll be another installment. And at first I was, not really thinking that, oh yeah, we should just make another one. But like, now I'm kind of wondering if it would be worth talking about. Like, should we continue and have an idea in mind to release something another couple of years down the line?
Well, I've already sent you the final script, haven't I, for Biff and Mario's last movie?
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm getting at is, if Biff and Mario's last film is to be released, multiple decades from now, it might be a bit mean to make people wait that long for another one.
I see
Maybe
what
we
you're
have to do an in-between, a Taco Trouble 3 to cap it off before the final film.
I think it would be. I was actually thinking about this earlier. Like, it would be quite cool to see a another addition to the series in the vein of something like TE, where they're like flying around
on an adventure.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same. Yeah, that it would be nice to have an adventurous one. That I mean, yeah. I'd have to come up with some more set designs than just one big room, but
I think on our part it's not that difficult to I can write it in 20 minutes and there we go.
Yeah, it's the work all ends up on you.
Yeah, and then just come back in 5 years and see how I'm doing.
So there's a final movie, and then we just do like final movie 2. If they died at the end of the other one, then everything's fine. It's like a Tom and Jerry cartoon. The next one, they're all alive again.
Well, it's just out of order. It leaves space before the final movie. All kinds of adventures can happen before.
So we're gonna Star Wars it and release a bunch of prequels.
Yes, exactly.
I have to visit the Galactic Senate.
Yeah, there's all kinds of material out there that could be mined.
I mean, I would love to see like a sequel to Heart of Darkness and see what you do with that.
No, I think Heart of Darkness stands alone. You could never recapture what Heart of Darkness does.
Yeah, that would hurt my brain, I think.
I maintain that there's never been anything like Heart of Darkness ever seen in Brickfilming since.
The guy who says my favorite line in Heart of Darkness, which is, "The flower people are having a party if you're into that sort of thing." Like, I talk to that guy pretty regularly. I would say every other time I'm texting back and forth with him, I work that line in with him. Like, sometimes he asks me, like, it's the open to the conversation. I will, "Hey, what's going on?" "Well, the flower people are having a party if you're into that sort of thing."
I don't think that's Heart of Darkness either. I think that's TE.
No, that's Heart of Darkness.
That's Heart of Darkness?
Yeah, it's the first scene when Mario appears in Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, because that guy worked at the TV station with me.
Wow, I have no.
And
memory.
TE we made while we were in college, right?
I don't know. That was
I'm
like
asking
40
you,
years
Penta,
ago.
because you know more than we do.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, TE, you're in college, and Heart of Darkness is the station. But I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that the character design of the guy who says that line is the same guy who waves at Jesus in Taco Trouble 2, and he has a really funny line there as well, which was just improv. But I really liked it, so I made it stand out a bit more.
I think going back to what you were saying before about like how it being this really slickly put together kind of film makes it even funnier. And I think that ending, where you go back to their house, I think that kind of perfectly, embodies like the whole film and like to as an extent kind of like Biff and Mario, just like the absurdity of it all. It just does that so well, I think. And it's really clever how like you manage to you make the background and everything look like the original, but like everything is brick built, everything looks like anything's been updated to look like now.
Yeah, I was really happy doing the live preview, and like it got a really big laugh when it zooms out from inside their house and reveals that it's just 2 walls.
That's even like that's another parallel to the Seinfeld finale, is like when they at the end of Seinfeld they're in jail, and then Jerry starts talking about the height of George's button on his shirt, which is from the pilot. So it's like Biff and Mario end up back in their original house, kind of, in their old life, I guess. It's kind of I don't know. I think you had that on the brain, Andy.
I don't remember being influenced by that, but
or maybe it's just a common trope. Who knows?
Well, I mean, it was my idea to bring them back to their old house. That wasn't in the script.
See, I don't know jack shit.
I just think it's so funny. Like you put so much detail into like these buildings that they drive past. Just like that first one and just for that one shot. But but then it had to be impressive for it to actually make
for it to work.
Yeah.
That's another concept I love, is putting way too much effort into something that's completely pointless. I think that's really funny.
Yeah, I agree. That's good.
But yeah, also at the end they get into the same car from a well and drive away, which is the exact same ending as a well. And I feel like the end sequence when they're talking in their house, I wanted that the shot is similarly set up to how their house is shot in TE, and their conversation all takes place in one shot, and that was intentional. I was trying to make it, similar to TE, whereas previously the film, it's got cutting between all sorts of different shots. It's made a bit more dynamically, so I thought it would come across as intentional for the end to all be in one.
When really we only did that because it was less work. Or the camera was so gigantic there was no way to get cutaways of the individuals.
And the house is kind of built to really only support looking in from one angle.
Right.
That's a good point.
Certainly, it's an amusingly small house.
And I love how the mug is like in the same position as it was in TE.
Yeah. And I wanted a bunch of grass outside to make it look like it's just a mess that they don't take care of. But yeah, I suppose on that sort of note, it would be worth mentioning that, another thing that was suggested by Andy at the very start was that Biff and Mario shouldn't move up to a modern animation standard.
Yeah, I thought that would look really weird if they did.
Yeah, I thought the same. It would just look wrong if they were moving like everyone moves in Brickfilms these days. So that's how I got the idea to shoot them. Well, yeah, the whole film is shot in 24 frames per second, but most characters are 2s and Biff and Mario are 3s. Yeah,
I think you managed to make them look a lot like they do in like Tokyo Trouble and Bork, which is really good, I think. And it's still like really well animated despite being, completely different to everybody else. And I think it kind of, it's a bit of a sort of like a throwback to, I think, a conversation we were having, like 3 years ago with Fallen Creature about that whole idea of having different characters animated, in different ways. I think isn't there also the film Mr. Bad Frame, whereas
Mr. Bad Frame was something I was probably influenced by a great deal.
Yeah,
maybe people would think like, oh, did you get that idea from Into the Spider-Verse? But no. By the time we come up with that, I don't know if Into the Spider-Verse had come out yet, and I actually still haven't seen it in full. But yeah, I think that on my part, Mr. Bad Frame is probably the biggest influence on the frame rate thing. Because that like takes it to a further extreme where most characters are 15 FPS and the main character, Mr. Bad Frame, moves at only 3 FPS.
Yeah, I think you found a good balance of it still looking actually really good.
I was just going to say, oftentimes people have this misconception that a higher frame rate will equal better animation, which is not true. And this is something that we often try to push back against in the community. But yeah, so I discovered in animating this film, at first I wanted Biff and Mario to be like really janky looking, but then I found that I preferred to animate them well. I kind of found it difficult to allow myself to really make them wobbly, even though they are extremely wobbly because the figures are so old and they've been used so much, because they've they're the exact same pieces of plastic going back to so like they're
we think
I guess
there were a number of stunt doubles over the years that I think we're pretty sure we ended up with something pretty close to the originals, but
the heads aren't original, of course. I replaced those with heads that I took the mouths off. But yeah, the arms and the waists are extremely loose, or else extremely tight. And so yeah, they wobbled immensely between each frame. They had to move, and then I had to straighten them up again. But yeah, what I discovered was if you actually consider the physics correctly, it's possible to make some pretty nice looking animation at 8 frames per second, and it's got a pretty fun stylized look to it. The shot that I was happiest with was when Biff has the bananas and he stands up on the table and walks back to his chair and like falls onto the chair.
Yeah.
Kind of crashes onto it and bounces back up a bit. And for just one frame there, I took his legs off so that he could really sink into it and then come back up. That was kind of the one that sold me on trying to make good 8 frames per second animation rather than intentionally bad 8 frames per second animation. But it seems to have the right spirit to it, I think. And also most of the time they raise one arm when they talk, which is what they did in like TE. Before there were animated mouths, they just raise one arm to show who's talking. So I was like copying that I was keeping their movements limited on purpose.
Yeah, I remember doing that specifically, having to raise the arms because otherwise we wouldn't know who's talking. How did everyone else do it back in the 90s?
Well, for most people who had talking, which was very few of them, they didn't have editing, so like they'd just have to turn on the camcorder and talk over a video recording, and the figures wouldn't move at all.
Okay.
But it seems like the modern method is whoever's moving around, like just sort of moving not just moving like raising their hand, but like whoever is the most animated in the scene is the person who's talking if you don't have moving mouths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nowadays, most people have Dragon Frame now, so they can really control how they time their lines to the animation, which is, what I did with Jingles. I wanted Jingles to be like really well animated and really move to each word, and depending on how the line was delivered, I wanted his movement to match how the delivery sounded, and I wanted that in contrast to Biff and Mario, with their intentionally stilted motion. So the Jingles animation took a horrendously long time each shot, because the monkey's really difficult to work with.
Well, and he doesn't have as much articulation either, right?
Not really, no. Just
because his tail doesn't move.
No, for most of it, his tail was blue tacked behind the chair he sits on, so I could kind of move him around on the blue tack, which helped a great deal. But then when he's walking on the table, that was incredibly difficult. I didn't want to use blue tack on the table surface because it'd be too much work later to paint it all out. So most of the time he's just balanced in place, and it took a lot of flipping back and forth to get him in position in the next frame and balance him correctly.
See, like all those kind of problems, like it would be just like, no, you know what? It's done. We're moving on to the next scene. And then like we're editing. It's like, this does not look good, but it's better than good. It's done.
Actually, when we were first discussing the film, I asked Andy if he wanted Jingles to be like a classic Lego monkey, or else this Fabuland monkey that I found with this big round head and a suit with a tie. It looked really funny, but he wanted it to be the classic monkey, of course.
Were you disappointed?
Well, everybody loves the classic monkey, and considering that this is a script from 2003, there was it was commonly thought in the Brickfilms.com community that like every Brick film should have a monkey, that being the classic monkey. But one of these days I might fit in the Fabuland monkey with a tie eventually somewhere, for some reason, because it looks so funny.
It does indeed. I just pulled up a picture that would have been very funny. Although he has giant eyes, yeah, he would be staring right into your soul.
Yeah, I think for this film, the classic monkey was the right decision.
Yeah. Although, yeah, I think it would be funny to do a Fabuland like brick film with like all the characters.
The Fabuland monkey would have been easier to animate. I was kind of thinking about that when I suggested it.
Of course, the chairs are Fabuland, aren't they?
I love those Fabuland chairs, yeah. And those Fabuland chairs, they're available in that nice sort of earthy orange colour.
Yeah.
I wanted the set to have earthy colour scheme, and then the classic Lego colour characters would stand out greatly against it.
I guess it's also as well, you can actually, move them a bit more as well, the characters, because the standard chairs, there's not much room for like movement, is there, compared to that? So
I have a question for you, Penta. Did you sink a lot of money into this? Like, how much of this stuff did you have on hand, and did you have to invest in brown Legos to make the courtroom? And I
most certainly did.
All our money.
Basically, yeah. but now we have this cool film. Oh, I didn't count.
No, I don't think anybody wants an actual number, but
Yeah, but if anybody
I've
does
done
ask,
productions that I am embarrassed to say the amount that I sunk into it, but
the official answer is I didn't count. It was just whatever it takes.
yeah.
I mean, at least with Lego, it's something that you can, reuse in, future brick
Sure.
films. That's something that I found when, a couple of years ago now, I bought a load of brown bricks, and because actually most of my bricks are, probably about as old as Biff and Mario actually, because of my older brothers, from the 80s and 90s, they had lots of Lego then, and that's most of my collection now. So I didn't really have much brown, so I bought a load for a brick film like 3 years ago, and they just come in use so much now, because it's like, even though I spent quite a lot of money on them, it's like, well, I can reuse them a lot.
Yeah.
Boy, if I had a nickel for every time I bought a load of brown.
Well, of course, one of the difficulties I had making the film was that Jingles was often framed against something that was brown. Him being a brown monkey, I had to take a lot of care to try to give him nice highlights with the lighting through the windows, or a light behind him or something, to really pick him out so that he'd be visible. He wouldn't just blend into the brown background. So that was a concern in pretty much every shot with Jingles in it.
That's something that you wouldn't really generally think about, even, actually. Funny.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that went into the film that I hope people don't think about. There's a lot of invisible editing, like, comping different bits of the frame with, maybe I'd turn off a light, like, to take away a reflection on the ceiling, and then take a bunch of frames with just the one light off, and then shoot the scene with all the lights on, and then comp the ceiling back in with that light turned off so that there's no reflection on it. All sorts of little things like that.
I'm assuming that there was probably quite a lot more like pre-production work that went into this than like previous brick films, because like, did you do a lot of like storyboarding and stuff?
Well, I started without storyboards, but by the time I got Loic on board to do the music, he asked for a rough cut of the film to start working with. So then I had to make a bunch of storyboards to fill in what I hadn't done, and line up all the lines in editing. Then by the time I had all the storyboards in order, suddenly I realised that the film was longer than I was anticipating. But these were just like really, really bad MS Paint storyboards, really quickly done, just for the sake of being able to send him a rough cut of mainly for the timings of everything. But there was a lot of pre-production as far as designing the sets digitally and ordering all the pieces. Well, ordering all the pieces took a long time. That was, over the course of a couple of months. And then, like, buying... Actually, we had to install a larger table because the set was so big. And previously I'd only ever been making brick films on a tiny table. I was long overdue, a bigger table and a DSLR and Dragon Frame and all these things that I got in preparation for this film. So it was a very useful, motivator to actually improve.
Yeah.
I feel like everything you're saying is revealing the fact that we're lucky you got it done in 2 years. There's a lot of work here that is not, like you said, it's invisible.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I was very much trying to make it invisible.
I mean, I think...
pretty much almost every shot has like a digital work on it, cleaning something up or replacing something with a different version of the same thing.
I mean, it all seems very natural. I mean, looking back at it now, I mean, I'm watching on loop as we speak, and everything just seems so like natural, and there doesn't seem to be, you could very easily just say, and I mean this in the best way.
Yeah.
That you could very easily say you didn't do any like, visual effects work, and I believe you, because it just everything blends so well.
That's what I like to hear.
I'm gonna have to go watch when this is all done. I'm gonna go watch it again.
Like I think I've said before, I think the best like editing is the editing you don't notice, and I think that that definitely is true here, I think.
But also at the same time, I feel like a large part of it is doing as much as you can real to begin with.
Yeah.
Like I was never editing in the ceiling like entirely, or the chandeliers or something. Like the shots were shot with all the pieces in place, but then I might just tweak something later or cover something up with it. The same shot, but a few frames looped in a different, with it looking slightly different.
Do you feel like that you had pressure on you to make this just like I've gone down that production rabbit hole where you're just like, how far do I want to chase this? Like how microscopic do I want to make my work? My, you know, like how much effort you're putting into something to do something that maybe people won't even notice was
well, the thing is, I feel like I was doing it all because I wanted to make it that good, you know. I wanted to feel like I had lived up to this idea in my own mind, because I feel like I call Taco Trouble my favourite Brick film. So Taco Trouble 2, it's like to make it to the height that I did, this is like how I view the original, if you know what I mean. So I had to make it this way to feel, in my own mind, to feel like I had lived up to the original.
And you didn't want to disappoint us, of course.
Well, yeah, I mean, I felt like you would have been happy if it wasn't like up to the standard that it is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, probably. Just the fact that it got made would have been like, hey, it got made. But
if somebody even just made it at all, yeah.
Yeah.
Just imagine someone over your shoulder going, "Can you do a smooth edit?"
Exactly. I do the thinking, you do the doing.
You do the doing, yeah.
But no, so I'd say it was pretty much for myself, what I did with the film. So I didn't really feel any pressure, like, you know, in a bad way.
I think that kind of goes back to, like, you know, what you guys were saying earlier about, like, you know, making the originals for, like, the audience of, like, 5 people and putting all that effort into it, because a large part of it, I think, you know, you're making something that you love. You're making it largely for yourself. You know, you want to please yourself in a way. You know, by making it as best you can, kind of thing, and put like, you know, a lot of effort into it. So I think a lot of it is you don't want to disappoint yourself as much as, you know, you're probably your toughest critic in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So.
Some of those really, I mean, our first ones that were, even by the standards of the day, were not great technically. I don't know. I always felt like when we were showing those to people, it's like, you know, like parents at a dinner party inviting their 5-year-old to sing a song or something, and like, oh yeah, she's super great. You know, like you're sort of like dragging here. Let me get out this VHS tape and stick this in, and we can watch this, and I will force compliments out of you. That's not the case anymore. Now at least, you know, it's genuinely good.
Yeah. I mean, that actually sort of takes me back to like my sort of pre-YouTube days, before I was like sharing my stuff on the internet, and I did this. I used to do these films where I'd take photos. It was mostly Mega Bloks rather than Lego, but I used to just like take loads of photos and then film my computer screen as I went through the photos, and basically I remember I was sharing the films. It was mostly just like for me and my parents, and then I showed my granddad, like, you know, like one of the films, and like the sound quality and everything was so bad, and actually the picture, he had no idea what was going on. He couldn't hear it. It was just like, it was like trying to say something positive about it. It was so funny. It just sort of takes me back to that kind of. I mean, obviously, I feel like there was more out. You could take, you know, more out of Biff and Mario. I feel like even then, like there's more to appreciate with them, I think. But yeah.
But I can imagine now that most people, when they see something at the start, you know, even people watching Taco Trouble for the first time, which is usually the first one that people see, when it starts, they're kind of thinking like, what is this? This looks weird. But then, you know, as it goes along, hopefully they'll get into it and realize what people see in it. And of course, you know, the same thing with the old ones, because I do love the old ones.
There is just something just inherently just really funny about like things falling over and like blowing up for no reason. And, you know, Taco Trouble, and actually the whole series has a lot of that going on.
It's actually something that we've observed in the past, is that the people who were making brick films in the 90s, or else just people who were making brick films but outside of the community or any outside of brick filming online, they have a much greater tendency to light stuff on fire and just destroy everything for fun.
We tried to blow up something in didn't we, Dave?
The police station.
I thought we filled something with like lighter fluid and tried to blow it up.
Oh yeah, we did, didn't we?
But it didn't work.
Not really. I think it all just burned off and then it was done.
Yeah, but it's all in the film. This big build-up that amounts to nothing. But I was going to say that somebody expressed disappointment that nothing got set on fire in Taco Trouble 2. They wanted to see the whole courtroom burn down.
That would have been good.
So if there's another script eventually, it might have to include some fire.
But see, if people want something, then I don't want to give it to them.
Oh, well, maybe you'll have to tease that something's about to get set on fire.
That's a good idea.
It can be a reference to, oh well, they'll light it and nothing happens. But the making of Legomation video is rather interesting, I think. The fact that it was even made at all when it was.
When was that made?
That would have been like mid-90s or so. The station threw away some editing equipment. I brought it home and used it to make that. And that would have been about when it was.
It's rather unusual that you continued with brick filming for as long as you did. Pretty much nobody else who started in the 80s or 90s did the same. And, you know, to make videos like a making of, essentially for little to no audience, until many years later.
Right. Yeah, that's another one that, I mean, that was definitely 1995 or 96, whenever that was. Like, that's barely the modern internet. Barely. And definitely no video on the internet. So that's another thing where it was just like, and I was pulling all that footage from stuff that we had shot, I think, during the making of TE, was when, that's when I do the thinking, you do the doing, and the, can you do a smooth edit? Like, all that stuff was shot in our dorm room. And, you know, I essentially didn't assemble it for another 6 or 7 years, something like that. And then, you know, I get it all done, and who am I showing it to? Like, it just went nowhere until we, you know, years later got the website. Video on the web became a thing.
But sometimes when I'm making my history of brick films videos, I find old things to put in them. It sometimes feels like this stuff was made just for me to find it, you know, many years later and put it in my video. That's what I felt. I was like, man, this is absolutely perfect for my video. And it was made seemingly for little to no reason. And then, yeah, that's while you're making TE, because Andy has the ship. I mean, I think some of it's OL and some of it's TE. But Andy has the ship in his hand, and I had a very difficult time recreating the ship from the handful of shots that it's seen in TE. And then of course, when it came time to actually film their house in Taco Trouble 2, the ship is barely seen at all. It's like hidden behind their house. You can see the
I hate
nose
to say this, but I don't remember it being in there. But I've demonstrated this whole conversation. There's lots of stuff I don't remember. So,
but I do like to think that the film you could watch it multiple times and catch more things. But yeah, the ship is out. It's behind their house at the end, but you can just see a little bit of it. It might look like I faked it, but the whole ship is there.
That's awesome. You spend hours doing that just for a shot that Dave didn't even notice.
Yeah, and you know, barely anyone else would notice that. So,
is any of this still put together at your house?
It is actually, yeah, most of it. Actually, the courthouse was the last shot that I shot. So it's the first shot in the film, but it's the last thing I shot, and that's actually still mostly standing. A cat has knocked over some of it, but yeah, it's mostly all set up like it was seen at the start of the film. And I have the ship still built, and you know, their house is probably still somewhere. I still have a lot of cleaning up to do.
May as well get out the Craggle and make the ship permanent.
I'll probably keep the ship assembled and just put it on a shelf somewhere, just for fun.
After like so long, you know, making the film, was it quite heartbreaking having to sort of like, you know, break apart the courtroom and
I want to say no, because I guess like by the time I was on the last few shots in the courtroom, I was kind of sick of it. So it was like cathartic in a way to just tear it up and say, okay, I don't need it anymore. I can just tear it apart and, you know, throw it off in a box somewhere.
yeah.
But well, actually, as I was getting to the last few shots, like I shot all of the shots facing one direction in a big block, and then turned the entire set around and shot all of the shots facing the other direction. So by the time I was getting down to the last couple of shots, I knew I could tear more and more of the set out to be able to fit the camera in, that I wouldn't have to then put it back in for shots I needed later, because I didn't need it later. So like by the time I was on the last few shots, the set was falling apart because I continued to tear at it for different camera angles and didn't bother to rebuild it. So like by the end it was in ruins.
You should contact the Lego people and, you know, release the maybe we need some merchandising, you know, like we need the Taco Trouble Lego line, you know, like Harry Potter or any of the other stuff.
I mean,
here's the courtroom set. That's the big one.
I was gonna say, like, because you know, with the Lego Star Wars theme and stuff, like obviously Lego don't mind like incest, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say that Lego mightn't be the biggest fans of Biff and Mario. But you know, one thing, I'm just looking at the film again, and I'm just remembering that when I was recreating Biff and Mario's house for the end scene, I was trying to, you know, scrutinize the old frames from TE, and I was counting the studs on the floor to line up the bits and pieces. and there was this cabinet in the back corner, and I assumed the cabinet would be 2x4 in dimensions, because that was like what I was familiar with. But then I counted the studs, and I was looking at it, I was thinking, this doesn't make any sense because the cabinet's 2x3, but surely there's no such thing as a 2x3 Lego cabinet. I've never seen that before. But eventually I had to go and look it up on Bricklink, and there was a 2x3 cabinet that was only ever sold in, I think, 2 sets in 1983 and 1985. Wow. In those colours. So I had to go and make an order just for that cabinet.
Oh gosh.
Is that worth a lot of money?
No, it's not, but it's very... There weren't many sellers that had both the cabinet and the door in the right colours. I wanted to get a seller out of the two of them, so you have to make one order. But yeah, there were a couple of things like that.
And that's another detail that you're the only one who knows that.
Yes,
until now.
yeah.
Absolutely.
But again, it would have annoyed me if I didn't get it right. And that's really what matters.
I think that there is nothing worse than
watching your own film and seeing all the things that are wrong.
Yeah, like especially if it's just like, even if actually maybe even more if it's something small like that. You every time you look at it, you have to do that in the end, don't you? You know.
Yeah, you just know that if you don't do it right, it'll annoy you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I'm gonna rewatch it and point out all the things you did wrong. Then.
Well, you know, there are actually some shots, some of the ones that I shot first that I look at, and even now I think I'd shoot that differently now. You know, I might have deeper focus, or I'd frame something differently. Because, like, at the start, I was still really learning, like, what I should be doing with cinematography. I am pretty happy that it all came out pretty well. I think because I bought so many lights and lenses and whatnot, and set it up decently well that it all slots together. But there's a couple of ones that I'd do differently.
There actually is one shot that in the film I spent years working on, Batman Episode 6, where... there's a shot where he's looking down this ladder, and it was quite a hard shot to actually do because I had to like the camera was sort of straight on, but like I had to make it look as though it was looking above, and it was a really complicated thing to do. But I realised there was like a continuity error because the ladder was like it was like the other way than it should have been in the other shots, and like no one would really notice it unless they were like really watching it. But it was just, you know, I spent 3 years working on this. I just couldn't face that being there, even though it was a well animated shot. It looked really nice and everything. I was like, no, I can't do that. So I thought I could just like, you know, flip it around like 180 degrees, but it just didn't work. So I had to just reanimate that shot I think it was like the night before I released it, just so that I could just So I couldn't just sort of like every time I watch that then just think, oh, that shot,
Yeah, it has to be done.
Yeah.
I can tell you that if Andy and I were in that situation, we absolutely would have let it go or not noticed.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, come to think of it, do you think that there is any sort of future for yourselves in Lego animation? Like maybe Dave, you might introduce your son to it in the future?
I don't know. I mean, he's getting into Legos more and more. I have not combined my stuff with his, so he has his own Legos, and I think you guys probably know this. Like, I think most modern sets seem to be not a lot of bricks and a whole lot of like little weird things.
Yeah, big
so
plastic
sometimes
shapes,
he just wants to be like, he's 7, so like he wants to just be a kid and build like crazy crap, and like there's just like he doesn't have bricks to do structures or walls or things like that. So we're trying to encourage him though. There's a friend of mine who might be he's trying to get rid of some Legos, and I might make him an offer. Make an offer he can't refuse.
Hopefully some nice old stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's some vintage, but not super old. And he says it's not worth very much. So, and he says most of what he has left is bricks, because he's been. What was the site you said you ordered that cabinet from? Bricklink. I think he's been on there, like he's been rebuilding some of his vintage sets and then getting on Bricklink to order specific things that he's missing so that he can sell it as a complete vintage set. But he's kind of left with a bunch of just oddball bricks and stuff. So I was like, well, that's what we really need.
Yeah, I'd take them if I were you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of the opinion that if there's Lego, then get it.
Yeah. So what about you, Andy? Don't suppose did your kids ever dabble with Lego animation?
No. I have 3 daughters, and they've played with Lego, but they haven't really expressed any interest in building. Plus, I don't know, I wouldn't trust them to make it, as clever as our stuff is. So.
Well, they'd have a good writer on hand.
Yeah, you should write some kind of incestuous, violent story for your daughters to film.
Involving Jesus.
Involving Jesus. Let's hit all the touchstones.
Yeah, I'm guessing they've never seen Heart of Darkness.
Boy, probably not. They saw all
your
the recent ones.
Your 2 oldest haven't seen the newest one, all of them?
No, they've seen the recent ones, Taco Trouble and Afterwards, but I don't know if anybody watches those old ones. I'm surprised. So, no, I don't think they've seen Heart of Darkness.
I couldn't even imagine what the response might be.
Have you shown your son any of them, Dave?
No. For sure, he hasn't seen any of them.
He better not.
Maybe when he's older.
Yeah, I think I remember telling my kids they couldn't watch Bork until they were 21, I think.
And we probably shot that with them in my house.
Probably, yeah.
It's interesting that you did come back to do Lego animation at the start of the 2000s.
Yeah, why did we do that? I mean, we did it in college. We went away, started living our lives, had kids, got married, and for some reason kept doing it.
I think it's when you moved back into town and you were interested in doing it.
Oh, yeah, I forced you.
You were... Yeah, right.
So, is that always how it's worked? Andy may find somebody to make his films and makes it happen?
No, he didn't have to twist my arm too much, but I was definitely ready to be done with it when we were done.
Yeah, the animation fell and the editing fell on Dave, and it was very tedious, and I think that's kind of when we stopped, when it got too tedious.
There is another guy in the community who's been around for a long time, and he said that in 2004-ish, you had posted a thread on the forum basically saying that you had all these scripts but not enough time to make them, and offering to let anyone else make them if they were interested. And this guy said that you were in talks a little bit, but it never happened. He said that the script involved Biff and Mario meeting a serial killer. I wonder if you have any recollection of this.
I have no recollection of that. I remember asking people, making that offer, and most people were very hostile.
Yeah, I found the thread and I looked at it, and most of the replies were pretty hostile, yeah.
Yeah, like, how dare you suggest such a thing? But I have no recollection of talking with someone or a serial killer. Maybe he dreamt that.
It happened eventually, and I think it worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And who knows, there could be more in the future.
But yeah, I did find one of the non-hostile replies in that thread was this guy saying that he's interested.
Wow, okay.
You should go back and contact him.
Yeah, I'd like to see that script.
Yeah, I wonder if he still has it.
Oh, you don't even recognize the idea?
No, that doesn't ring any bells at all.
Well, there you go. You could just write it off of that. Just that one sentence. He goes back and meets a serial killer.
Yeah,
recently I was digging around in my basement looking for old scripts, and I found stuff I had completely forgotten about. I know there was one where Biff and Mario did an Iron Chef competition against each other. There was one where they had a talk show with each other. So all kinds of crazy stuff I had written and just forgotten about.
Well, let me know if you still like any of them.
All right, I will.
Biff would be a terrible talk show host. He would just pop off at everybody.
That sounds like a comedic setup.
And I think I may have sent that script to you because I think it was Patrick Stewart was the guest on the talk show for some reason. No idea why.
So what sort of lengths would these scripts be?
I have no idea. I barely remember writing them. So.
They sound like, kind of brief, like more like along the lines of Bork or Breaking News.
Probably, yeah. Not the big adventure kind of things. I think Taco Trouble took so much out of us at the time that we were kind of like, it's hard doing these long things, as you well know. And it just kind of drains you then. It's easier to do something shorter, quicker.
Mm-hmm. Single set.
Yeah.
And yeah, people nowadays, when they first see Taco Trouble, they, generally think that the animation's a bit janky. But if you look beyond the animation, some of the other technical qualities are actually quite good for the time, like the lighting, especially when they are sneaking through the castle and there's like light coming in the small arched windows. And there's also that like reddish light that's in the Dr. X shots. And some of those Dr. X shots are composed nicely as well. But the red light is something that I brought back. They have this like reddish pink light on them in Bork, and also you can see some of it in Breaking News. So I decided I'd bring back the red light in Taco Trouble 2 that kind of just follows them around all the time. And I thought it made them look more like Biff and Mario than just like generic spacemen.
Yeah, that lighting was all Dave, I'm sure, because that's what he did.
Yeah. I feel like I'm living the plot of Galaxy Quest, where like the aliens watch that sci-fi show and then build a real ship based on the way the people were operating it on the show, and then ask them to go save their race of people. Have you seen this movie? It was from what?
Yeah.
Late 90s?
I'm aware of it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's been on my watch list for a while.
It's humorous, because like they designed all the equipment just by watching people operate it, and like they don't know how to do anything, but like they always use the same pretend buttons on the set.
So you're saying all the choices we made in the earlier movies that were just convenient or whatever we had around, now in Taco Trouble 2 was like, canon. This is important to have it look this
or
way.
Like having the ship look perfect, or finding a freaking 2x3 cabinet when no one's gonna know if you used a 2x4 cabinet. Like that stuff's crazy to me. And it's like, in Galaxy Quest they were just like amazed and kind of honored that someone revered them to that degree, and thought that it was some kind of documentary and not a piece of fiction. And I'm just amazed at the, like I said, the more you're talking about the backstory of Taco Trouble 2, the more I'm learning how much effort it took you to do it.
I could go on. But yeah, when I was introducing the film in the live screening when we did the premiere, and we showed the original film first, and I was explaining how people watching it now, like, they enjoy the way the characters move and they think the way they walk is very funny. And it's like what you're saying, where that stuff's now built into the sequel, where Biff and Mario move in a specific way and they stomp around on the table in funny looking manner, reminiscent of the originals. But I'm sure at the time you were just moving the figures.
Oh yeah, yeah, and like as you were talking about frame rates, and you're speaking in actual numbers, and I know that the footprint of what I was editing was all 30 frames per second, and I vaguely remember saying like, okay, I need this action to take about this much time, but we often did not pay attention to how many frames did we shoot of that, like how fast did we have that person walk, how many like interstitial movements are there, how many frames do we really need. And it was like, you've nailed it down to 8 frames per second. I don't know that it was that precise when we were doing it. It was just like, oh, we have this many shots of this guy walking, well then it's going to be 4 frames per shot or 5 frames per shot. You know what I mean? Like just to make it last the right amount of time, because we're and like kind of going back to what Andy said when we got out of it, like I think we are totally outgunned at this point as far as tech skills. Like we've been out of it too long. We were kind of not in it for the real revolution in the way that animation is done that way, and certainly putting it in the hands of regular people and the techniques that the community has developed. I mean, like, yeah, that's why I think this is such a great partnership. Is I have voices and Andy has stories, and you have the rest of the ability.
Yeah, I still think that the Biff and Mario films are, largely unmatched in terms of the humor and the voices in brick filming.
Yeah, I think
agree.
They're both very iconic voices, like Biff and Mario, like especially.
Yeah, you should have interviewed Dave in character of Biff and Mario.
That'll be the next episode. You have to interview them one at a time. I don't know. It would only be a matter of time before I replied in the wrong person's voice.
Well, I mean, once we've interviewed like every guest we can think of, we will have to end up having to just interview fictional characters from the Brickfilms. But I mean, I was it's funny, like when I first watched the Biff and Mario series, I never realized that that you played both characters, because they sound so different. They're both so unique. It sounds like 2 people.
All the voices sound different from each other.
Yeah,
even down to the really
that's
minor
high
characters.
Praise. I always felt like there was a lot of similarity between everything. But like we talked about before, I think that Mario was born from, we need somebody who's totally different, who sounds totally different from the other guys. So
yeah,
I do like how in a lot of ways he sounds a bit like the text to speech generators before they existed.
It's interesting how like all the minor characters, they have their own voice and their own names and whatnot. Like when in TE Mario is going around looking for the murderer, and like he encounters like Fresh Dude and Mutant Boy and the gardener and all of these people who are the race car driving twins. There's no reason for them to have these characteristics and funny voices.
I forgot about all of this.
All of these people you'll see in the crowd in the new film, of course.
Wow, I totally forgot about the race car driving twins. Wow.
They're in the back row. One's red and one's blue.
Are they the 2 who say to get the recipe for that yummy taco pie?
No, that's the flower people, isn't it? Boy, I don't know. What did the race car driving twins say?
Oh no, a question I can't answer immediately.
It is. We knew it would come to this point eventually, one day.
Wow, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. It sounds funny.
And actually, one of the flower people in the crowd has this like yellow bib on him that came from a single set from the late 70s.
Wow.
It took me a while to determine what the piece was by looking at some really horrible quality frames from Heart of Darkness. And then when I did eventually track down what it was, there was literally only one for sale on Bricklink at the time. So I bought it.
Is that worth money?
It's probably worth too much. I probably shouldn't have paid as much as I did for it to appear in the background in a crowd, but not really worth all that much.
I'm telling you, this is like Galaxy Quest. It's finding out that someone has analyzed every possible detail of a production you made. It's crazy. I mean that in a good way.
I can imagine some new viewers would probably be confused that people in the crowd have flowers on their heads, or one guy has two heads. There's a bunch of knights with big lances and spears in the air.
Have people commented on this kind of stuff? Like, are they saying like, "Oh my God, you have this piece of detail, this tiny esoteric thing from this past film"?
I think that they probably get the idea. They probably assume that a lot of it is from older films. But I mean, people have recognized that like the people in the front row are from the original Taco Trouble.
I mean, I really like in the very beginning they go like, "Oh no," when the judge is called Steve, and that's a throwback to "Oh Wow," isn't it? I think.
Yeah,
TE,
yeah,
and also
Personal Dragon.
There's a couple of other Steve references throughout the series, and in the Taco
that would
Trouble.
be a good Lego release, set release would be the personal dragon. Build that. It would just be an empty box.
It's different for every person who buys it.
Yeah, right. Just a random collection of blocks.
You have to build it to find out what it is, and when you're finished it terrifies you.
And his name is Steve.
But yeah, Steve is also in the Taco Trouble deleted scene where they go to Steve's pub, which is actually a really funny scene. It shouldn't have been deleted. One thing I was kind of worried about with the start of the film was that new viewers would think that Biff is called Steve, like they would think that Mario is saying Steve, as if to ask Biff what he's thinking.
Yeah.
I hoped that the way I shot the judge entering would make it clear that he's the Steve. The way the focus changes from the bailiff to the judge, I hope to make it clear that that's who he's talking about.
I think that worked, yeah, because you get a good like establishing him, and stuff.
I think the audience for Taco Trouble 2 is people who are fairly at least exposed to, if not very familiar with, the previous film or perhaps more of our work. So I don't know. I think it was obvious, but all of us on this call are all too close to it to really judge.
We'd be the types to know. But I was hoping that by making the film to a high standard visually and animation wise, I was hoping to draw in new people.
Sure.
I was thinking like this is an incredibly niche film to be putting a lot of effort into, so I better make it good enough that it can actually reach a slightly wider audience and bring in some new people who haven't even heard of the original before, but will still be interested just because of the merits of this film on its own. And then hopefully we'll go back and watch the original as well.
You always just sort of say, "Oh yeah, you always watch Taco Trouble first, and then watch like the earlier ones." But I guess maybe you could say watch Taco Trouble 2, then Taco Trouble, and then
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We always advise people to watch Taco Trouble first rather than starting at the start. Then to have some familiarity with the characters and the writing helps in watching the older ones.
I started watching. I watched TE first, which is probably quite a weird way to start because I didn't watch the very first one. I didn't watch Taco Trouble. I just watched like from there. But I really loved it from the start. So
something that I found greatly amusing was that at the moment I'm working on the History of Brickfilms video that will cover brickfilms.com and brickfilming online in the early 2000s. And when brickfilms.com was first made, there was 4 different length categories in the film directory, and the longest one was for films that were over 25 minutes long. And for quite a while at the start of the site, there were no films in the category, and like the description of the category just said something like, it's unclear if brick films of this length even exist. But then later it was changed to say, like, you know, these films will have been made by a team of people over many months, and this is the pinnacle of our hobby. And the first films that were entered into that category, and were the only films in there for a long time, were T.E. and Heart of Darkness. And, you know, watching scenes in Heart of Darkness, I'm just reminded of the phrase, "This is the pinnacle of our hobby." And it makes me laugh.
It was all downhill after that.
I'm interested in asking Andy if you have any influences in mind as to, like, where your writing style might have come from.
Well, like I said, it was probably all those movies in my head. You know, if I think of like the comic philosophy of what I would put into Biff and Mario and what they do, you know, I might go back even to something like the Marx Brothers. I don't know if anyone even knows who they are anymore. These are old movies from the 20s and 30s, but that the comedy that they had, the interactions, the poking fun at authority, all of that is definitely in Biff and Mario. Probably Mel Brooks movies from the 70s and 80s, Blazing Saddles, of course, History of the World Part 1. You know, both of those, Marx Brothers, Mel Brooks, Monty Python, I mentioned them. I mean, that absurdity of everything. And I also think there's this, all of those things I've said, there's this awareness of performing for the audience. There's kind of a winking at the audience that I always imagine Biff and Mario as characters. They know they're performing for an audience. They're not real characters. They know that there's someone out there watching them that they're winking at. So I think that all comes back from some of those older things that I mentioned.
Yeah, I find it very funny how, you know, the lines they say in the Biff and Mario films, they're often like stating the obvious extremely blatantly, you know, as if to an audience.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
So I think it has this, it really, it's a good tone to have for the films to be winking like that.
Yeah. And they know that they're plastic figures acting on a stage, you know, that they're not real people, real characters. They're little toys.
They're breaking the third and the fourth wall.
Well, their house only has 2 walls.
It's because they broke the third and the fourth walls.
That's right. They need more room to talk to the audience.
Well, actually, so you talking about like the Marx Brothers. Actually, I did last year watch Duck Soup, and
yeah, that's absolutely the best. Yeah,
I can see the inspiration from that actually. And a lot of the kind of like, you know, conceptually, and the kind of like type of comedy, I can see that there actually, the inspiration.
Yeah, it's a huge influence, not just on me, but on, you know, comedy in the past 90 years. So I would recommend that to everyone. Go watch Duck Soup if you want to know what funny is.
I greatly enjoy how the lines and the jokes, they build on each other, especially in T.E. Like, it seems like each line is continuing on from something that happened previously.
I'm going to have to go back and rewatch that. It sounds funny.
I know, me too.
It made it very difficult for me when I was doing the history video of the 90s, when I wanted to like cut to just one joke from TE, just to give people like a very brief idea of it. But I find it very hard to find like just a setup and punchline type of joke, because everything was building on the entire film as it went along, so you wouldn't understand anything if you hadn't already seen everything that came before it. So I was like, you know, scrubbing through the film, like, what clip can I use for this purpose? So it was difficult, but, you know, I really appreciate that style for the full film.
I mean, I don't know why, but like my favorite bit in TE is just when they accidentally just destroy that building and kill everyone.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, oh well, let's leave.
I do remember that.
There's so many quotable lines, like in that sequence. I'll tell you as soon as I know.
Boy, I must have had some good lines in there.
Yeah. Well, I sometimes describe it as being like every line is funny, because even if the line isn't a joke, the delivery makes it funny.
That's definitely true.
It's great that you each have the strength separately.
Yeah, on the page it might not be that funny when I wrote it, but I always had confidence Dave speaking them would make it funny.
And even with Taco Trouble 2, as soon as I heard the line deliveries, I knew that it was going to work. I was hoping that the film would actually work as a film and come across funny to people.
Do you remember this, Dave, when we were doing the lines of Dr. X for Taco Trouble 2? You couldn't do it quite as well as you could 17 years ago or whatever, because that was hard on your voice.
I do kind of remember that, yeah. I don't have that much range anymore.
Well, I thought it worked anyway. I like to think that the film slots into the series nicely and, feels like Biff and Mario in spirit.
I mean, I would say that it is, in canon, it's like 15 years later, so the fact that it may not be able to be quite as high-pitched, I mean, that can make sense in the universe of Biff and Mario anyway.
What's the statute of limitations for Lego World?
On murder, there's no statute of
limitations. Oh, that's true, yeah. I guess if they're accused of running a spear through somebody.
But it's funny that you still had all of those damaged figures from years back.
Yeah, I got them all. I know I have the burned car from the original Taco Trouble, just that chunk of black plastic somewhere.
I think it's probably something that a lot of Brickfilmers can relate to. I still have all of these old pieces in just like an unsorted Lego. I can still see things assembled from old films, and
oh yeah,
or even like I make the Benny and Lee series where they have this horrible stain on their wall, which has been the same sauce stain for over a decade.
I mean, that must be like 13 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, since early 2009, so it's pretty old by now. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is about Brickfilmers and holding on to things for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I have a sort of small box that's just dedicated to old props and things that I can't really use again, but I can't face like throwing away.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like if it's managed to survive stuck together for so long, I'd be ashamed to tear it apart now.
Yeah.
That's how I'm like the junk guy at work. And that's my policy in a nutshell right there. What you just said is, if it's managed to survive this long, I am not going to play God and throw it away, even though it is probably worthless. So that's how we end up with like original Macintosh computers in the closet that, are never going to get used again. Crap like that.
Oh, and looking at some of the old behind the scenes pictures from the website, I was kind of surprised to see like a dual monitor set up with CRT monitors. I'd never seen that before. I kind of thought that like dual monitor only came in with, LCD monitors.
Was this in our dorm room, or what was this picture?
No, this is like from 2001.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually like about $100,000 editing setup.
Wow.
Like back in the day. That was all hardware driven, and yeah, the two monitor thing was big back then. Or like, super advanced if you had two monitors on there, but yeah.
That keyboard is so similar to what I use at my university, because I do I'm a third year film student, so I've been dabbling around a lot with like Avid and on Macs and stuff, and it's just very similar.
Yeah, and that's what this is. This is Avid that I'm editing on there.
I'll link another picture now, and you'll see the more of the setup.
Oh yeah, that's in the room next door. So that we used to call that offline, which was like I don't know. I think the original idea was that you'd come back with your tapes that you shot in the camera, and then you'd like slam something together in this room, and then you would take your edit decision list, your time codes and everything, and bring that to an online suite, and then that would be done at a higher quality. But yeah, this was just a tape-to-tape room, and I think Andy's in there watching, looking at raw footage, I think. Yeah, these two rooms were right next door to each other.
Yeah, I look like I know what I'm doing.
You do.
I guess in a way, especially if I can get some Taco Trouble files and release a remastered version, this is sort of like, it's like silent film preservation.
Yeah, I'm making a note right now to find this stuff so I don't forget, because I have the technology to digitize off those old tapes, so...
And would Taco Trouble be on tape?
All of it would be on tape at some point. I might have some direct digital exports of the later ones, like the post-2000 ones, but all of them also exist on tape.
Okay, and that would be the highest quality?
Might be, unless I could find one of those exports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just imagining that there must have been a better digital version of Taco Trouble at some point before it was compressed to be put online.
Oh, yeah. Well, even the tape would... And we're not talking about VHS tape here. We're talking like a much, much higher quality broadcast tape. So it should look pretty good if I can find it.
That'd be great to see.
And if I can't find it, that's really sad because I have a lot of crap, and if that crap is not among it, then what am I keeping all this crap for?
I also have the behind-the-scenes pictures from the original Taco Trouble where you're in the car.
Oh yeah, driving in the car.
Around. You have a monitor in the car even. Do you know what type of camera it was that Taco Trouble was shot on?
I mean, it was a video camera. Everything we did was on a video camera. It was not... we never used a still camera. I mean, the quality of the behind-the-scenes pictures is probably better than the quality of the video we were creating. It was like this little... I don't know if you can see it in that.
I've sent another picture.
Oh, yeah, the little Z camera. Yeah. I don't remember where I got that, but it was basically just a small camera on like a Z-shaped foot that had an NTSC output. And that was it.
It's pretty strange, like the way you made these films at the time you did, because all the other people in the Brickfilm community were using webcams and computers.
Yeah.
But for you to have all of this like broadcast equipment and massive editing station, and everything's just unusual for the time.
If I really dug, I probably got like, because we would hit record because it's video, so like we'd hit record on the deck and then reach in, make an adjustment, reach out, count to 3, reach back in, and I want to say we had like wild audio hooked up just so that we could hear ourselves. So there's probably like all this raw footage from this stuff that would have, I mean, like if you really wanted to remaster it, you could really go crazy. Well, I don't know if I have all of that, but I bet I have some. I will dig. I think
it'd be no surprise, but anything at all you can find, I'd be interested in seeing.
Yeah, I probably have better copies of even these pictures because these were all digital pictures. I think taken with my digital camera that shot onto floppies.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
But I'm definitely glad to hear that you're the type to hold on to everything.
I try to. I mean, like I sent you those. Did you end up using my mouth shapes, or did you kind of remake them?
No, all the mouths are original.
Okay.
They were in just about good enough quality to hold up even for the close-ups.
Yeah, I noticed they were just a little bit on the small side, but I think we didn't want to go crazy making them huge because they were really not going to be that large on camera in the end. And also remember too that we were editing everything as like in standard definition video, so like basically 640 by 480 was what we made everything in.
But yeah, even for the new film, the mouths were usually rather small in the frame, so they were still, the images are usually still smaller than the original file, like as far as how much they actually took up in the frame. They were only stretched their breaking point once or twice.
Right.
And I was really happy to be able to use the originals because I think it's a large part of making the characters look correct, look like themselves.
Well, clearly you have attention to detail that is unmatched.
I felt like there was just enough shapes to be able to animate the mouths in a manner that looked pretty nice. Like I much prefer sort of low frame rate mouth animation to like sort of gloopy, liquidy, high frame rate mouth animation that sometimes some people do. So I really like the Biff and Mario mouth animation style, and I felt like by having some knowledge of animation, I could line them up in such a way that it wasn't like flapping between shapes weirdly in an eye-catching manner.
And I remember when we were doing those that I can't remember exactly which like letters or which sounds. There were ones that I wish I had like one or two other shapes that would better fit. But then it was sort of the challenge of, well, how do you make L might have been one of them. I think I used like a tooth for L's, and that's not really right. That's not the way your mouth looks when you say an L. But the challenge is making something that looks like an L but still looks like a Lego face.
Yeah.
That doesn't have too much detail in it.
I used the tongue out mouth for the L's sometimes, even though it's not exactly, it's not a perfect L, because you don't stick your tongue all the way out saying an L, but it looks pretty good for, it was pretty funny and looked good for a lot of it. But in the original films, the tongue out is very rarely seen, I noticed.
Of course you did.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, guys. This has been a really great conversation. I've really wanted to have the opportunity to talk to you for quite a long time, really, probably since we started this podcast, so like 3 years ago. So yeah, so it's great to finally have the opportunity to chat with you guys.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, it was great. I learned how funny some of my older movies are.
Yes, thanks very much for coming on. It's great to have this conversation after spending so long and making the film together.
Yeah.
So, bye.
Bye.